Welcome to the Over 40 Alpha Podcast with your host, Funk Roberts.
Welcome to the Over 40 Alpha Podcast. This is episode number 65, and I am your host, Funk Roberts. I'm a former professional athlete turned master metabolic trainer, online transformation coach, certified MMA strength and conditioning coach. I've got an Amazon best-selling book. I've been highlighted on ABC, NBC, CBS, ABC. I've been in magazines, and most importantly, though, I'm known around the world as the guy who helps men in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond get in the best shape of their life through mindset strategies, through recovery strategies, through healthy nutrition, and of course, workouts. But most importantly, helping men naturally increase testosterone levels and balancing their hormones. And you are listening to the Over 40 Alpha podcast. I'm so happy that you're here. It's Men's Health Month, and this is a very important month for us men, because this is a month where we really have to step up to the plate and really focus on our health, really focus on us getting healthy, losing weight, excess fat that we may have, naturally boosting our testosterone, creating a healthy lifestyle, creating a lifestyle that focuses on health and wellness and being in the best shape as we can while increasing our immune. And this, if there's no other month on the planet being June, this is the month you've got to step up. And, this podcast is here for you. I am here for you. I run the Over 40 Alpha Brotherhood, www.over40alpha.com. focusing 100% on helping men all over the world, 40 plus, even 30 plus, completely transform their bodies, their lives, and their testosterone. And today I'm excited because one of the pillars in my program is recovery, which means not only recovery in between workouts with yoga, mobility, things that are going to help you stay pain-free and injury-free, but also sleep. Sleep is huge. Sleep is if you want to increase testosterone, if you want to lose weight, if you want to have more energy, less stress, balance hormones, you have to focus on, be more productive, sleep, and more sleep. And you hear about it all the time, man. You hear about it all the time. You hear, you got to get that sleep. You got to get that 7 to 9 hours sleep. You got to get that sleep. But there's so many different things that factor into us not getting enough sleep or struggling with sleep or suffering from insomnia. A lot of stuff has to do with health. But on the flip side, once you're healthy, once you have your healthy lifestyle, there's still a lot of issues that may come up that may be affecting your sleep, why you can't get sleep, depending on who you are. If you work shift work, or if you drive, or you're on long haul drives, or you're a first responder, or you have your own business, or you have, a big family, or you're in the middle of a move or stress or whatever it is. There's so many factors, but once we know what type of behaviors can help us tackle sleep deprivation, making sure that we strive for 7 to 9 hours sleep every day, knowing how important it is for testosterone growth, knowing that if we're not getting sleep, we're not boosting testosterone, we're not losing weight, we're not building muscle. Let's just start with those three things that most guys want. Not even going to go into the energy, the confidence, the libido, the unbalanced hormones, the belly fat storage, just not being able to, no energy, not being able to tackle things you need to tackle day in and day out, stress. But it's sleep, and it's something that we have our hand on almost immediately, right? We don't generally have to buy something or invest in a program specifically. Like if we invest in some of the behaviors that we know can help us get that 7 to 9 hours sleep, then we can do it. But the only problem is there's a lot of elements. Like I said before, there's a lot of factors. There's a lot of, not just factors, your type of factors, who you are, but how many things affect us not getting sleep that we may not even know about. Even if you're the healthiest guy and you still struggle with sleep, there are certain things you can do in order to curtail the sleep deprivation, right? And ensure that you get optimal sleep on a daily basis. But it's all about education. It's all about power. It's all about knowledge, right? So empowering you through knowledge of what's going on, how to get sleep, what type of things affect sleep. Then once you get that, you can now make better decisions, and you can now truly focus on making sleep a priority. And today we've got Mollie McGlocklin on. And she is the creator and lead behavioral change coach at Sleep is a Skill, because sleep is a skill and you're going to learn a lot about that. But I love having Mollie on because she is the amount of information this woman knows. I mean, her whole story of how she created Sleep is a Skill was through her own poor sleep habits. So it's not someone who's just jumping on talking about, you need to do this and you need to do that. She is coming from experience. She's coming from the fact that she could not sleep, and she went down the rabbit hole of all of these different things, but her going down, how to make those changes, those behavioral changes, and then how it just literally completely turned around is incredible. And her sharing that story, but also, we're going to talk about important things like the circadian rhythm, right? And what that is, because I'm sure you've heard of that before. You've heard about the circadian rhythm. Oh, what is that? What is that? And you may hear a little bit here and there, but really getting deep and understanding what it is, why it's essential for your sleep, why it's essential for your health, mood, waistline, and how you can manipulate the circadian rhythm to what you are doing. Obviously, the circadian rhythm is a circadian rhythm, but you're able to make behavioral changes to help you be in line with that, right? We're going to talk about sleep and testosterone and other hormones and how that affects it or lack thereof. People who have who work shift work, right? My wife works shift work, so Mollie's gonna talk to us about that. Talk to us about how what the lay of the land is that looks like for a shift worker, and how sleep can what changes you can make in order to get that sleep, or the optimal amount of sleep you'll need in order to be able to work properly. And then also, Mollie will share sleep gadgets. I mean, she goes down tons of different gadgets. We use the HRV in the Brotherhood, which thank goodness is one, but there's other gadgets out there that are also great in order for you to get that knowledge, for you to get those stats. So like I said, she's done so much, man. She's written books, she's been in the press, she's done studies, she's written articles. So you're in good hands when we talk to Mollie McGlocklin. So please enjoy this. And before we go, just to let you guys know, speaking of sleep, we are having a Funk Supplements promo this week. As you guys know, I own my own supplements company. I create high quality supplements with natural ingredients to help men and women over 40 get into the best shape of their lives, to help plug the deficiencies that you may not be getting with your nutrition or with working out. Like, let's face it, if you're in the Brotherhood or you're in the Sisterhood or you're doing any of my programs, we work out quite a bit, 4 days a week. Plus, we do our yoga mobility. We need to supplement. We're not the normal regular person. So we need to make sure that we get those supplements to plug in those deficiencies. So I'm really excited that we're having, specifically on the week that we have Mollie M on, the sleep expert, we're having our AM PM stack. That is our AM PM supplement stack, which is our sleep shred, which is our number one, quickly becoming one of our top 3 supplements out there. All natural ingredients, including ashwagandha, including magnesium, chamomile, passion flower, melatonin, but it's sleep shred because it also has CLA, 5-HTP, things that are L-carnitine, things that are going to help you burn fat while you sleep. Imagine that. It accelerates fat burning process, perfect time, while you sleep. And this sleep shred, which I don't live without, it's an amazing supplement for me. I love it because it knocks me out in 30 minutes and I don't wake up groggy. I don't wake up all groggy, right? Like I've used other sleep aids, and man, it feels like a truck has run over you trying to get up, man. It takes like an hour to get up. I don't got an hour to get up. I need to get up right away. So sleep shred you take at night. Ultra shred, which is the AM stack, you take in the morning. Ultra shred is my all natural fat burning supplement. It's another one of our top supplements. Coffee, green coffee, bean, raspberry ketones, garcinia, cambogia, a little bit of caffeine, some green tea, all when combined is a powerful fat burner, and boosts your gives you that energy. So you take ultra shred in the AM, whether it's as soon as you wake up or you take it 15 to 20 minutes before your workout, and then you take sleep shred at night. If you want to lose weight, if you want to burn fat, if you want to improve your sleep quality, grab this AM PM stack. This week we are having 25% off. There's one for men and one for women. I believe there's one for women with our fat shred instead of ultra shred and sleep shred. So grab it. AM, your discount code is AM PM 25. It works just for this week. So grab it now. AM PM 25. Go to Funk Supplement Shop, go to the stacks, grab that AM PM stack and get it done. All right, let's get to this amazing podcast with Mollie McGlocklin. Enjoy the podcast. Now we are live, brothers, and welcome to the Over 40 Alpha podcast. This is episode number 65. The reason why I'm laughing right now is because Zoom let us know that it was recording. So, you kind of start the podcast off with a little, what the? Anyways, I'm really excited today. Episode number 65. As you heard in the intro, we've got Mollie McGlocklin on this show to talk about sleep. Mollie's from Sleep is a Skill. And as you guys know, recovery is the second pillar in this program. We talk about mindset. Of course, most people run to the workouts, they run to the nutrition. But truly, if you don't have your recovery on point, which is, of course, yoga and mobility work so that you can have a sustainable workout life without getting injured and pain-free, but also sleep. That is the key, because this program, and for you men out there, it's not just about getting the six-pack. It's not just about losing weight. It's not just about, changing your body. It's also about naturally increasing your testosterone and balancing your hormones and having a healthy life. And sleep is the key. And sleep is something that we can touch on and adjust without having to pay anything. Really, you can really just start to figure out the different behaviors around sleep. So I'm so happy to have Mollie McGlocklin. Did I say your name right, Mollie?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay. Sleep, how are you? Thank you for being on this show.
I am great. Thank you so much for having me. And I love what you've created and your kind of mission. And so really, really grateful to be a part of this today.
Thank you. So let's start off with how Sleep is a Skill was created.
Yeah, great question. Because really the whole story for me was that it was solving my own problem with my sleep. So what it looked like for me was before essentially, if you go back I was living in the middle of Manhattan, entrepreneur, burning the candle at both ends, night owl, had lots of labels about my sleep. I'm, a short sleeper. I'm a bad sleeper. I'm a night owl. I'm all these sort of things of how it was, but I felt like it was just fixed. And that's like just the lot in life that I had as it related to sleep and not much to really do or say about it. And it wasn't until I went through my own period of insomnia while traveling internationally that everything sort of changed for me. And it was really my own rock bottom period in my life because, and certainly often when we have sleep disturbances, it typically doesn't come out of a vacuum. Like it's not just like, oh, you're fine. And then, it's all a mess. It's, there's a lead up, there's signs that I missed along the way. And some of those signs I missed that I was getting more and more anxious. I was getting sick more often, mood imbalances, hormonal imbalances, all of these things that I was not connecting as being an element or a piece of that puzzle of some of the mismanagement of my sleep. So when it got to that point with my insomnia at its worst, I was in Croatia and I, took Google Translate and go into the doctors in Croatia because I was like, I can't sleep, help. And they very nice, and yet they're busy. They got stuff to do. And so here you go. Here's a prescription for sleeping pills. So for their version of Ambien. And in that moment, it was really clear to me that, okay, I got to figure this out. And so ensued this whole kind of going down the rabbit hole of understanding, really becoming fascinated with chronobiology, circadian rhythm entrainment, bringing my sleep back to a level of homeostasis. And once I had achieved that, and that, I'm like brushing over all of the periods that it took to get to there. That was a lot. And yet once I restored that sleep, then it wasn't even just the restoration of how it had been, because as I shared, it wasn't that great. Then it was also looking at then optimizing that sleep. And once it got to that point, I could not stop talking about the shift in my sleep, what the difference it made. And so I started just organically working with people that were having difficulty with their sleep. And, just kind of as a passion project. And then it grew to now we have online courses, small groups, one-on-ones, podcasts, newsletter, all of these things kind of got created out of really my own struggles. But our intention with Sleep as a Skill is this intersection now between technology, accountability, and behavioral change to really make that lasting difference. So we'll get into, some of those elements so that my intention on this podcast is that, by the end of it, you leave with really real practical takeaways and hopefully a renewed sense of wherever you might be. I know my story was a little, might have been one side of the extreme, right? But even no matter where you might be with your sleep, even if, it's all right, or it could be better, or it's this, that, and the other, wherever you are in the spectrum that they're from this perspective of sleep being a skill, then there's always elements that we can up level on it, educate, and then take it to the next level.
Yeah, there's a couple of things there. Thank you for that. There's a couple of things that I like, but I'm going to go back to a bit about your story, because what were some of the things like of course now you realize that you hit your rock bottom. What were some and without going like deep in,
yeah, sure,
you can, what were some of the things that you did? Because were you a sleep expert before that? You were just an entrepreneur.
I was an entrepreneur. We had my fiance and I worked together in behavioral change elements, so it lended itself nicely to then what I ended up creating with Sleep as a Skill, but it was in behavior. So this was even more confronting because it was the sense that I'm involved in workability for people in their lives on a day-to-day basis, and then I can't even sleep, like the most basic of things, really. And so, but what it really looked like during when I was at, that low was just days and days of, barely squeezing out any sleep, if at all. And just my state that I was in was just such this hyper arousal state. We're dealing with all kinds of taking on a ton with our businesses, bootstrapping. We did the largest study ever conducted on poker players, and, just a lot of moving parts and employees, and the stress level, how it manifested for me. Some people it manifests in other ways. My experience was with those sleep disturbances. And so out of that, it felt very much like a failure, like was how I related to myself. Like, okay, I can't even just know myself to go to bed and fulfill on this element of things. And then it would stack, and it felt like I really couldn't get what I needed to get done remotely. And then it moved into kind of the survival state. And I really got connected to how people can very easily go down that path of, oh, well, now I got this prescription, and now I got to have this other prescription for this other problem that, and then years go by. And that was a very real concern for me, because I was at this crux of, thinking of myself as like involved in wellness and in this conversation. And yet, when you're desperate, you also want to sleep. So you want to take the thing that's going to bring you sleep. So you're at this kind of, crossroads. And so that was my experience. And yet, what I discovered out of this was that there are so many modalities that we can bring in. And I want to also say that it actually landed at one of the best things that ever happened for me. And I can certainly say that at the time, I would never thought I could ever say those words, but it actually was so transformative. What's likely, I'm going to tend to be a stubborn person, and, or to keep doing things that aren't working for me. And I would keep doing them until the cost was too high. And so out of this, it really, woke me up, no pun intended, and then transformed how I run the management of my days really fundamentally. We can get into that from a circadian perspective too, but also the thing about the behavior and the background, the behavioral change elements really played a role here, because also now I have so many clients that come our way, and they've worked with tons of different, sleep experts, and they've gone down different paths, but it hasn't been able to stick from that, making those changes day in, day out from a lasting perspective.
Yeah, definitely. Behavior is huge. And
Yes.
That's the one thing you can give people you can get the expert to give people, okay, here's the type of workouts or here's the type of thing you should do, or here's the type of thing you should do. But after a while, if you don't focus on the behavior of, creating a behavior that will ensure that you can eat healthy and, sleep healthy and your nutrition, all of those things, then just going to the expert is generally not going to be sustainable, right? It's not going to be sustainable. It's the behavior that's huge in everything. And I like the skill portion of it too, because when something's a skill, you can always improve on it, right? Like you can always improve on that skill if you just there's no end. Like you can always do something to improve or tweak or right. Which I love the fact that sleep is a skill is a nice way to to just
reframe it.
Yes, reframe it exactly.
Yeah. 100%. Totally.
Yeah.
And I think we're at a really cool time right now because with the sleep tech industry is huge and projected to be huger. Is that a word?
Sure.
So
the word here.
Yeah, exactly. We'll take it. So the projections are outrageous of what's to come, and also making sense of what is important to measure, then how to shift it over time. But it's having so many more people get in this conversation that I think in the past might have just been like, oh, my sleep's my sleep, whatever. But once they start getting metrics on it, on both their biometrics and some of those health-based ones as it relates to sleep and consumer grade, granted, of course, they're not going to be as reliable as a polysonogram, but it's going to help us really get some more data that in a place where there might not have been data before.
Right. Okay. That's good. That's good to know. And when it comes to sleep for us, men, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, women as well, but mostly when it comes to us, hormones plays a big part with sleep, right? So can you talk about how sleep will affect our testosterone and other hormones in our body that curtail us?
Yes, absolutely. So one, if you're listening and testosterone's in the conversation for you, what's really common is this sense of, okay, I've got these numbers on my testosterone, or I assume that it might be low. I want to increase it. But that's not the only case. There's some people that have other side of the spectrum, but it's just a particularly common one that in the conversation of sleep. So of that fundamental stack of things to do to naturally increase testosterone, sleep takes a high piece, high on the rung from that perspective. And we do know that the first stage of sleep, when we're going through deep sleep, is gotten a lot of press more recently for its lymphatic drainage elements of things. So helping with cognitive function and even links with when you are sleep deprived, then that could potentially be heavily linked, is what it's looking like, to things like dementia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's. But that's also within deep sleep is where human growth hormone is something that is really, really a predominant amount of your creation of that throughout occurs during that first period of your sleep. So really being connected to that is so fundamental for our recovery. And then leading into this conversation around testosterone is really, really huge. I've also seen for clients, because we do a lot of measurements both before they embark. We usually have 90-day programs. Most of our programs are that. And but at the end of that, then retesting and then seeing that change in their testosterone can really be encouraging to see, oh my God, I can make a difference with these numbers, which is a big topic and empowering for so many.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's why, if you're listening, that's the sleep is the key, specific, one of the key pillars when increasing your testosterone, balancing hormones too, because not only sleep or lack thereof sleep will decrease testosterone, but also weight, right? Like weight gain.
Yes. So one of the things, I think one of the reasons I'm so passionate about creating this company in the first place was the things that I realized that can help make optimal sleep are, I think, areas that people might not have correlated with sleep in that part of that reliable stack. Often you see like these, top 10 tips to get great sleep. And it's like lavender oil and so nothing against lavender oil, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But really when we start understanding that our glucose and insulin levels play a significant role in our ability to both fall asleep with ease, but also stay asleep. So if you're someone that has a lot of wake ups, getting connected to your glucose levels can really be eye opening for many people, because that can be a common reason. It's not the only reason, but it can be a common reason for wake ups or disturbances in that sleep. So, because if you're someone that's saying, oh, I have low testosterone and I always prioritize, whatever the 8-9 hours, and yet I'm still not getting those results. If we're having that difficulty of sleep onset or those multiple wake ups, just certainly the inefficiency of that sleep is high. So we want to start looking at that too. So one, of course, acknowledging when we are prioritizing that consistent sleep opportunity to be in bed for that period of time. And if it's not serving us and we're having that fragmented sleep, so your body's not able to get into those deep stages of recovery, then it really behooves us to look closer at what could be at the source of that. And so to your point around weight gain, we also know that sleep deprivation, even just a couple days, can really up level the amount of glucose, just kind of resting glucose when you wake up. So I have a lot of clients wearing continuous glucose monitors so we can look and see the levels that those states are at, so we can help optimize for that and then improve also just the fallout of that when we do have that kind of roller coaster effect of spike and crash system happening throughout the course of the day, because then, the anxiety and stress that can often come from that, or fatigue and all of these things that can be counter to our goals. Once we start stabilizing that can often just make this whole conversation much easier, improve sleep, and then improve your ability to resist. So resist certain urges around your foods that you might not have if your resting glucose wasn't so elevated. And when it is elevated like that, so women actually have a more so women that are of menstruating age have another element of this to be mindful of, because certain parts of their cycle, they'll have elevated glucose, and it's already just by kind of by default. And then if you add sleep deprivation into that, then it's even higher, and then you're going to be more swings. But men at different points of their lives, then with that sleep deprivation, you can just kind of have the snowball effect, because now you're waking up, your glucose levels are higher. Now you're going to want the thing that you probably shouldn't have.
Right.
And then, so then it just keeps going. And then that further disrupts your sleep for the night. And, we see all kinds of fallouts with that. Of course, alcohol being another one too, that can further, make that stabilization process interfere with that. That's another one that I think wearables really help with, because it's so clear. That's just like the lowest hanging fruit. I know almost without a shadow of doubt, every single client I work with has at least the Oura Ring, but also I know we're speaking about the Whoop, and there's BioStrap, there's Apple, there's Dream, there's Muse, there's Philips. There's lots of different sleep tracking wearables in the market. And really often unequivocally, I can tell just looking at their stats, like, oh, they must have drank last night, because the HRV will just tank. It's not the only reason, but it's just a very, very, very common reason. So that all can play into that concern around, the waistline, if you will.
Yeah, that's great. That's great info. So one of the things we always hear about is the circadian rhythm, right?
Yeah.
And how that affects us, how it affects everyone, our sleep, our mood, our health. So why don't we talk about what is the circadian rhythm, and how does that play in the part of sleep and our everyday lives?
Yeah, great question. So I really think this can become a real superpower if we lean into this. So part of our intention with clients is to create a circadian lens by which they view their structure of their day. So what is a circadian rhythm? It's around a 24-hour cycle that we go through each day. And as diurnal creatures, we're meant to be active during the day and at rest at night. And so we're aiming to have our lives run as much in alignment with those rhythms of nature as possible, just because it's been so ingrained in ancestral health and leaning back into how it has been for us for so many years. And if we think of how it was really prior to Edison in a lot of ways, but certainly going way, way back, we were often a part of nature so much more. So we might have been sleeping much more within the elements outside. And then the sun would rise. And as the sun would rise, then the temperature in the space would get warmer. So those two key parts, light and temperature, are really huge triggers for circadian rhythm and the strength of your circadian rhythm. And so that would then cause you to wake up. And so then you would only have a certain period of the day of both higher temperature and more light, and the presence of light throughout the course of the day. And that would be an active time, things you're moving, you're doing stuff, hunting, whatever, all the things. And then when sun would set, then that was really this unequivocal cue to the body that both the light is no longer present, and then temperature is now down. So those two things would then signal, okay, it's time to shift over into melatonin. We're talking about hormones.
Right.
Two really important hormones to be connected to for sleep are cortisol and melatonin, and their interplay together. And that natural cortisol that you would have in the morning when that sun would rise was just everything kind of worked in alignment. And then because melatonin is known as the hormone of darkness, then it really, in a lot of ways, requires the presence of dimmer light, and certainly the goal to be total darkness in order to produce the optimal amount of melatonin to not only help you fall asleep, but then stay asleep. So out of that process, that would help us ensure that we had a really strong circadian rhythm. So they really exist on a spectrum, the circadian rhythm. So you can either be on the strong side or the weak side. Now, I would make the argument that most of us in the West are more on that weaker side of the spectrum. But what's so cool of a spectrum is like you can shift it. But what's really fascinating is that I think so many of us aren't present to the tremendous power of even just those two things I mentioned, the light and temperature being connected to those two things, but light being most important because that's our number one cue to our circadian rhythm of what it's supposed to do and when. And that is correlated in tandem with those hormones that we were discussing. And there's a certain set of hormones that are released in that morning hour. And of course, and we're not deluded by the fact that just align with the rhythms of nature and you'll be good to go. Because so many people also are shift workers, or they've got different things going on that they can that to lead into that is not quite possible for them. So even with that, then we want to create and mimic as much of that kind of rhythm as we can, even in a faux effect. But even with shift working, knowing that shift working is listed as a possible carcinogenic by the World Health Organization. So there are what appears to be really clear health counter health indications of going down that path of being outside of that rhythm of nature as much as possible. So we want to see what we can do to either mimic that or get in alignment with that.
Wow. So that is such a eye opener when it comes to learning what the circadian rhythm is, because two of those two hormones, cortisol specifically, that is one of the hormones that blocks testosterone, right? So when it's too high for too long, so obviously we need cortisol in the mornings when it's light. We're waking up, we're getting started. We need cortisol throughout the day, depending on what we're doing. If we're working out, we need cortisol. If we're just driving, we're going to need cortisol so that we're focused. There's different times in the day where obviously our cortisol levels need to be high, but it's the constant stress, which is one of the things that causes cortisol, a high cortisol, that blocks our testosterone, amongst other things like, adds weight, and all of the other things that go down that road. But the key is a lot of people carry that high cortisol into the nighttime before they go to sleep, right? Yes. And and remember, that's when you want melatonin. So melatonin and cortisol are having their own little battle. They're battling each other. Like, hey, you shouldn't be here right now. But cortisol will always trump melatonin if you're putting all the focus on behaviors that will release cortisol. Then melatonin probably doesn't even have a chance to get out, right? Like we need to kind of like baby melatonin, give it the things that it needs, so that at nighttime I gotta help melatonin here. It can't do it on its own because cortisol is way too strong. It will over dominate if I'm looking at my phone or doing all these other things that keep the light on. Let's do what we can to get this melatonin out and get our cortisol levels down too, because remember also testosterone produces the highest production is in the mornings when you need that, when you have good sleep. So you need that melatonin to help with the testosterone production. Because remember, cortisol blocks testosterone, so that in the morning that all happens. I think that's how I'm looking at it that way, specifically with the importance of the circadian rhythm and melatonin and cortisol.
Yes. Well, I'm so glad that you're really connecting at a higher level all the correlations there and the interplay there, because it's not a one and done thing. Like what you do in the evening affects the morning. The morning affects I think one of the biggest things that people are often surprised about is one of the first places that will begin for transforming our sleep is actually in the mornings and getting that morning sunlight and the trigger system that can be of resetting that circadian clock, and that master clock is known as suprachiasmatic nucleus, really connected behind your eyes in the brain. And that acts as that master clock that also informs all many other processes in the body in alignment with those hormones that we're speaking to. So many people are surprised, like, wait, if we're talking about sleep, why are we talking about first thing in the morning? And yet those things are very much connected. So you're making this converse or correlation that I think can be missed in top 5 tips of, this, that, and the other, because it is a bit more not complicated, but it can feel complicated just based on the difference of how we're often running our lives now. Because now, as living in kind of this 24-hour possibility, really since Edison, of being able to have, light consistently. I was sharing with you before we started chatting that I work with a lot of poker players, and they'll be in casinos, and on purpose the design is one to confuse the mind of we don't even know what time it is, what day is it, I don't even know what's going on. So we can live like that if we choose to, and if we don't interrupt that. So leaning into the fact that so much of our society now has us pull outside of that original example of kind of, being tethered to sunrise and sunset, and kind of when sun sets, it's like party over for the most part is how it used to be. But now it's like, that's just the beginning. We got Netflix to binge. We got wine
clubs,
to drink.
All
We got
night clubs.
all night clubs. Yeah, exactly. We got stuff to do. And it wouldn't even be that weird to be up till 1 a.m., 2 a.m. That's like not the strangest thing. But if you think back to ancestral, like that would be very weird to be, unless there's like a battle or something, to be lurking around in the darkness. Why would you be doing that? And so I think now we've normalized dysfunction in a lot of ways. So we're really looking to see how can we start to, within alignment of the, society, and obviously not then promoting, go live out in nature. A lot of what I'm saying, and you can, not to knock that. That's going to be great. But, for those of us that also are, in urban environments or just, that doesn't align, we're looking to see how we can kind of create a marriage between how it was and how it is today.
Right. So knowing that, the importance of getting that sleep and trying to recalibrate your circadian rhythm.
Yeah.
First, I'm going to talk about guys who are like at home, 9-to-5ers, they're at home, or they drive trucks for 8 hours a day. So there's really no shift work going on, but they're having problems sleeping. They're not getting the proper sleep. Maybe some of the behaviors are not right. What are some of the things they can do, to start shifting things?
Yeah. So one of the things we have people do is create a circadian crafted day, and you could do this with a piece of paper and pen. We have, spreadsheets and what have you, but you can literally just sit with a paper and design out your day through this circadian lens and what would align when. So we're looking to create a kind of 2-part system to the day because essentially for the brain, this is not like ethics or morality or any sort of thing. It's instead just for the brain needing these very clear cues of a clear ratio of kind of high light exposure, high energy output. That's where we have our higher cortisol, like we're speaking to, and activity. We're digesting food, takes a lot of energy. We're, making big kind of cognitive decisions and choices, and we're active during the day. And from that place, so we're looking to have that high ratio, but then post sunset, having a very clear difference in not only the light output in your space. So one, certainly transforming your environment in the evenings to really shift to very, very dim light. Like red lights over here and all these sort of things going. So red light, candlelight, some people do like Philip Hughes and have it on a circadian lighting system. Hospitals are starting to look to do this now and finding that can be helpful for the healing process, literal healing process, and the speed by which people kind of come back around. But so that circadian lighting, circadian temperature, so that you have higher temperature throughout the course of the day and then lower temperature into the evening. And that all acts as sort of this background cue that, okay, now it's time to kind of wind down. But also one of the cool things I've seen is that once we start to create that kind of clear triggering mechanism, then also behaviors can often fall in suit. So, you're wearing blue blockers in the evening and you've got the really dim lighting. And now you're moving into more relaxation, connection with family or what have you. And it's just a different phase of your day versus this blend that certainly I get a lot of, entrepreneurs or people that can kind of design their day in a particular way. And which can be this like blessing and a curse because then, right, they have the option to then keep things like, like just riding high right up before bed. And the brain just really isn't designed for that. Yeah.
Right, yeah. I just put my hand up if you're just listening, because there are times when I definitely do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that's one of the cool element. I often mention this one gadget, not because anyone needs to get it, but it's called EBB, E-B-B. And I mention it because it kind of nicely illustrates, they have it's kind of almost like a headband and it's a cooling element on the front. And the thinking from this is that, and they've done some clinical trials behind it and what have you, but it's for people that have difficulty with sleep onset that they've been able to discern that particularly chronic insomniacs seem to have warmer brain matter in the prefrontal cortex. And from that place, then they have that difficulty shifting off and turning off the brain. And there's over like hyper aroused states, rumination, all that stuff happening right up, when you should be kind of winding down. So when we talk about that even points to having reverence for our thoughts, that it can actually heat up the brain and body, which is fascinating, I think. But it certainly has us, at the very least, question our thoughts patterns that we're going into throughout the course of the night. And so some of the clients that I'll have because we kind of gamify it and have them do daily check-ins and sleep bots and what have you. And each day, we'll start to often see a pattern that begins to emerge. And it's like, got into a fight with my wife and this happened and whatever. And so it's like the structuring of the types of activities that we're doing during those times that we really want to be prioritizing, just like offness, whatever that looks like for you. It doesn't have to be fancy either, by the way. It's not like, yoga and light stretching. Like, it could be watching a show or
turn on the heat, cleaning up everything.
I know, exactly. I know, and then people think like, oh my God, it has to be this whole fancy thing. Yeah, like I don't have time for that. So then they just put on whatever they put on and it's a whole other thing. Yeah. But it can just look like kind of the same way with sleep training for kids. I don't work with kids or anything, but most of us know that with sleep training for kids, you have a lot of cues that you would do with them. So you would walk them around and, we're turning off the lights now. We're reading the books now, like all these trigger systems.
On your pajamas.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So what can those be for us? And even
put on your pajamas.
Yeah, pretty much. Exactly. And it really has us be responsible too for like the things that we're engaging in the evenings and what have you. But I think the more another angle at that versus from the kind of like maybe soft skills thinking of it is more just from the chronobiology piece of leaning into just how much that light rhythm can so take care of a lot of this for us, because when we do get that bright shot of light in the morning, that actually involves us having to go outside, because if we try to do it from behind windows, some different studies point to it taking 50 to 100 times longer to reset the master clock from behind the windows. So they cuts out particular elements of light that help tell the body that, okay, it's time to go. It's time for the day. It's time to do all these sort of things. And you really want to do that as soon as when you close to when you wake up as possible, and getting as much time as you can. It does depend on where you are geographically, and
Right.
is it cloudy out? Is it not? And unfortunately, the answer is, because people say, well, it's cloudy, so that doesn't apply to me. But actually, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, depending on your outlook, then that actually means that there's a requirement for more time outside when it is the case, or when it's winter months or what have you. So we're leading into things like that, but then there's also different sleep tech out there. There's like the Spurdy sun lamp that you can get through doctors, and you can now buy online. But and I have no affiliation with them, but they're one company that can help produce vitamin D through the lamp that they have. But then there's also other, like Brilli is another company, short for Brilliance, that is aiming to create faux lighting that can mimic. It's not going to be the same as sun, but try to mimic as much of that as possible. But it's profound. I mean, NASA has incredible studies looking at the difference between what they call static lighting and dynamic lighting.
Right.
And static lighting would be like what a lot of us kind of have, is just sort of like the same thing throughout, day into the night. Versus dynamic lighting, then lots of bright light throughout the course of the day, and then really dim into the evening, like incredibly dim. Like we're talking, if you can measure it too, there's different apps out there like Light Meter or Lux that you can use to put into your environment, see how much lux is in your space. And you really want it to be fairly dim in the evenings. A bunch of those lower digits, if possible, like kind of equivalent to candlelight or what have you, then can up level the amount of melatonin that we're producing into the evening.
Right, because that is the key, melatonin. But I just want to go back to the sun and cloudiness, because I
Yeah.
do have a lot of guys who live in the UK or live in places where it's often cloudy, and sometimes I get that feedback where it's like, well, it's always cloudy here, so I don't get light. But it doesn't matter, right? If it's cloudy, like you still getting out. Like the difference is just getting outside and starting that in the morning, right? And starting that whole process of waking up the body and waking up the mind, right? And everything.
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, because it depends on, like you said, where you are on the globe. So, I mean, I'm pretty nuts about this. So I'm moving more to I just signed a lease in Austin. So, all these places that are lower on the globe tend to get more sunlight. So you can be more extreme like that and move to places that have more sun. But if you're not going to do that, then you can also certainly lean into more light. And you will also be, you want to be responsible for the fact that different parts of the year are going to make it all the more challenging. And there's certain times where, going into winter months, particularly above the 37th parallel on the globe, then if you're going above into that, then it's much more likely you're going to have low vitamin D levels, and we know that's getting a lot more press now, more recently with the pandemic, but also just for general health and well-being, and it's very much connected to sleep. So getting clear on that you're already going to likely be at a deficiency throughout those winter months if you are in the kind of northern elements of the parts on the globe. So what you want to do is still lean into the cloudy days, because often even if you take out those apps, you can still measure the amount of lux that's in the environment. And often it's going to be much more than indoors for the most part. And so it's still going to do its job. And yet on those days, you want to aim to be out there a little bit longer is the difference. And particularly if it's in the winter months, because you're likely already at a lower level of that vitamin D, and people can say, well, I supplement. But what the finding is that often is not sufficient and not the whole story. And certainly even if you're just talking about circadian alignment, because so many of us are misaligned with their circadian rhythm. And that's when we have that difficulty falling asleep. Right. So if you want to phase advance and pull your bedtime earlier and want to get tired earlier, you want to strategically get more sunlight as early as possible. So there's a real cause and effect by the timing of when you get that and then when you get sleepy later. But if you want to, like with my poker players, we might strategically delay, so phase delay And then with them, if they want to stay up and be, on their A game later because they've got a
Right.
tournament or whatever, then we'll have them not get bright light until later on in the day, because then that has you get sleepy later into the night.
Right.
So there's that real kind of correlation.
And that's where those shift workers come in.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for people listening, because there's a lot of information that we're going through, and I think the first takeaway that I would tell people, well, you're going to tell people, but I'm going to,
Yes.
the first takeaway would be possibly just to write down the reset your circadian rhythm. So, what does your day look like? So you focus on the sleep more than anything, so that becomes more the priority, right? So during the day or during this time, this is what I'm going to really, do things that I need to be, alert, work out, work, kids, whatever it is. And then, at this time, I'm going to start shutting it down. I'll eat and I'll really start shutting it down so that, I don't know, an hour before you go to bed or something, you completely shut it down, turn off your TV and do whatever. I'll turn on the red light or whatever other gadgets you may have. But at least that I think will start to help people reset their rhythm, right? Or at least start to focus more on sleep than on not.
Yeah. So there's two frameworks that we have people look at through Sleep as a Skill. One is a sleep tripod, having workability between psychology, physiology, and environment. Because, of course, if you just had whatever, something acute happen, a death, you lost a job, something happened, your sleep is likely to be disrupted for that period of time, or chronic issues. That's in the psychology rung of things. And so looking at that, so, there's a lot of things that go into sleep optimization. So that's one part, the physiology, what you're speaking to with low testosterone, some hormone imbalances, might be thyroid, there might be, nutritional deficiencies, there might be all kinds of things. So really getting up under that. So doing all the great work that you're doing. Then environment. And if you're living in an environment where, I have some like doctors that are having to, they work different shifts, or whenever they're working there, it's just like fluorescent bright lights, but at the wrong times. And, so their space is giving messages to the body of what time it is and what to do when. So all of those things are important. And then the second framework that we utilize is called circadian rhythm entrainment. And this is how to entrain that circadian rhythm to strengthen it on that spectrum. So what's really fascinating about that is that there's these different time givers, or Zeitgebers, they're kind of referred to, but Zeitgebers just means time givers. And so basically those are these things that tell the body what to be doing and when. That first we spoke to being light, and of course the flip side being darkness. So those two are most important, top on the totem pole. Second, temperature, but then nestled in temperature, because of course we know the ambient temperature and and many, I think certainly in the future, many homes will have the circadian temperature setting.
Right.
So it can just be like warm during the day and then drop down to cool at night. There's also like Uller, chili pads, 8 mattress, bright beds, all these things that will auto do that in your bedroom space too, to make it cooler. But then nestled underneath temperature are these other things that influence the body temperature. So meal timing can definitely influence body temperature, meal type, exercise timing, exercise type, then getting into some of those other things like we spoke about of thought timing, but then chronopharmacology, so the timing of different drugs that you might be taking, and it gets layered, and even supplements or, or just the common ones of caffeine, nicotine, THC, alcohol, all of those things can disrupt, or prescription medications. So all of those can throw off our timing too. So, you're getting like a whole realm of looking at what are some of the common things that can throw off that bodily temperature. But I would even say one of the most other practical ones can be that food timing. And there's something known as circadian rhythm intermittent fasting. And we'll have a lot of people lean into that, where you're aiming to eat most of your food between sunrise and sunset. And can seem like, okay, I could do that. Although in the winter that can be challenging because it, gets dark pretty early. But often if you can even aim to be as close to that as possible, it's really shocking the difference that can make for your sleep results, and particularly measurable results like HRV, heart rate, body temperature, respiratory rate. And if you can even also lean into testing 4 to 5 hours before bed, stopping your last bite of food, which for many can be like, what? But if you do test that, that can often be, within reason within your own health, parameters. But if that could work for you, it can really be eye-opening for the body's ability to not be distracted with digestion and blood flow to the stomach, instead of doing what we spoke about of, lymphatic drainage in the brain, but also all the other recovery elements that we're looking to prioritize for. Because if it's tapped with doing a lot of other things while you're sleeping, then your ability to feel recovered in the morning is hindered.
Yeah, that's why one of the big things that I did, that I changed, was ensuring that I wrote down all of the 3 biggest things I needed to do the next day before I went to sleep, because this is always going. This is always going 24/7. It's always
That's great.
It could be a curse, but it's but it's a blessing as well.
Yes.
The only thing is, but what I found is when I wrote the 3 things down that I needed to get done, and I already had a little bit of a plan, then everything softened in my brain. Like I didn't need to worry about it. I didn't need to keep thinking about okay, I got to remember to do this. I got to remember to do that. And now I know that, okay, that's already done. So when I wake up, everything's going to be there ready for me to go. I've already planned it out. So now I can relax and get much better sleep. I don't have a problem sleeping and getting to sleep. But again, when you're in my position of an entrepreneur, trying to always create, ensure, support, I got a whole all these employees that I got to, manage. Sure. It can be overwhelming at some times. And if I'm working on a specific project, I'm going to work, I'm going to burn the midnight candle.
Oil, yeah,
to get it done. So, but there is a lot there. So that's why I think it's important to tap into sleep as a skill, so that at least, because what happens sometimes is people hear all this stuff and they're like, oh man, that's just a lot of stuff. How am I going to get through the eating? And I like that intermittent fasting. I'm going to try that, Funk. I'm going to try that. Oh, but wait a minute, then there's this and there's that. Oh, what are all these little tools? And just slow down.
Yeah.
But I think the number one thing is education and understanding what's going on with you, with your own body, and how sleep is, or what's affecting that sleep, along with learning how to change everything and start to become more focused on sleep. But you're going to need help with that. That's why, there's coaches and there's programs. Sleep is a skill. I would definitely make sure that link is going to be there for everyone to jump on, because there's going to be a lot of people who will come to you, I'm sure, because, that this is it's a pillar in the program. And I'm not a sleep expert. I know how sleep affects testosterone, but I'm not the sleep expert. I can give you the top 10 tips to get into more sleep. I can give you that, but Mollie and your team can give you more. So let's just quickly jump on, because I don't know how much time you have, but let's quickly jump on shift work, because my wife works shift work, right? She's in forensics. A lot of the guys work shift work, police officers,
sure,
et cetera, and they see a lot of stuff. They, so by the time they get home in the mornings or at night or whenever the shift stops, they've got to try to get back to sleep, or maybe they're tired enough to get to sleep, but shift changes every 6 days, every 3 days, every 2 days, or whatever it is. What high level, what's going on there? How can we help at least start that shift for the shift workers?
Yeah, great question, because shift workers are crucial to the functioning of our society, and can then often experience their own challenges. And then there are certainly financial difficulties for certain people that are layering multiple jobs and then finding themselves having to go late into the evening, and how to balance it all. So it can really be stressors at multiple ends, depending on what people are dealing with. But regardless, no matter what the situation, if you're working as a shift worker, then we want to be even more connected to this topic of strengthening our circadian rhythm than even the average person might. So either way, we all want to be hopefully making that urge for people to lean into that, but particularly for shift workers, just because we know some of the concerns from health perspective that can occur when we do have that misaligned circadian rhythm. So what do you do about it? So basically, if you are a shift worker, one of our aims is to, as much as possible, make it your lifestyle, so that it's a lifestyle across the board and that we're stepping into that. So what I mean by that is that we're creating consistency where we can create consistency. Now, sometimes there are difficulties for people that not only they're working shift workers, but it's rotating shifts.
Yes.
And then that can get really, really challenging because now you're turning your life upside down. It's like you just went to Hong Kong and you just came back, like it's really like that. I am excited about certain tech that is coming up. One's called this app Time Shifter. Originally, it was created for like I was just sharing with the jet lag analogy.
Right.
It was originally created for long haul flights, but it would have they actually use the same algorithm that NASA uses for their astronauts to keep their astronauts on their own circadian rhythm. But what's exciting about them is they just got a lot of funding to look at applying this for shift workers so that you can kind of create your own itinerary. And then on the times when hopefully you don't have this set up, but sometimes we do, where it is that rotating shift. And so then it will give you kind of a spit out of what times you need to shift your bedtime to, when you want to get light, when you want to, mealtime, or if you're leaning into caffeine or melatonin. Certainly for melatonin for travel can be more popular. It might be something to consider for a long-term thing, but that does have recommendations in there. So I think it's an exciting time where we're starting to see more things crop up to help people, be supported in that endeavor, because it can be really confusing, especially when you are then going to shift, because you are aiming to shift as many days in advance as possible. Kind of the same way, if you knew you were going to go for this long haul flight, you might start shifting a couple days in advance, and then when you return, okay, it's not like a one and done thing. There's a couple days where it's going to take to get back on track. So same for shift working. But if you are able to have a consistent schedule, then we're aiming to ensure that it doesn't deviate as much on your off days, because that can be a really common thing, and people can feel, out of the social norms, and they want to be with people and and of course, we want to set that up as much as possible, because that's going to be fundamental for their health and well-being. But as much as we can, because sleep just loves consistency. So if we can have across the board 7 days a week, a consistent wake up time, consistent bedtime, but then also those same things that we were talking about, the cues of light, cues of kind of higher body temperature in the mornings, we want to bring those over to where it fits for shift workers, and then put in as many parameters as possible. It can be challenging. Sometimes you're to drive home in the morning and it's light up, but you want to go to sleep, and it's so confusing. But so then that's where we really want to set them up so that their environment, when they at least do get back into bed, that it's as dark as humanly possible, as quiet as possible, do all the prep work that we can do for that, having kind of support structures so that the family is on board and they're not, oh, mom, wake up, or whatever, none of that, as much as we can, to really protect their well-being, and also just mental well-being, because that can really, put a number on people if that's disrupted over the long term.
Yeah, totally. I mean, for me and for Angela and I, she works 3 different shifts. She'll have maybe 4 or 5 or 6 days off in between, and they're totally opposite, nights, days, evenings, right? So they're all start at different times. Some are overnight, some is early morning to early afternoon, and then it's early afternoon to late night, and all of those continue to shift. So they're always going to be the same, but they're always, shifting with different days in between. So sometimes there's only 4 days in between, sometimes there's 6. So it's and that's usually police officers and I think nurses and those, frontline workers, first responders type have similar type, firefighters, that sort of thing, depending on where you are. But yeah, so that plays that becomes very difficult. I have to make sure that, when she gets home in the morning from a night shift and she wakes up at 3 p.m., I got to try to be as quiet as possible, but, try to keep things around as quiet as possible. But I know that it's very difficult, and it's one of those things. I think that it comes with the job, right? It comes with, if you're a shift worker, this comes with the job. It's not I don't think shift workers are going to get the optimal sleep. I may be wrong. Maybe technology is going to help us, but personally, I just don't think that that's going to be like optimal. You'll still get good sleep, but right.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I guess what I mean by that is one, if you're in a mental kind of place that you're not, if we start measuring your sleep. So, because often I have people start with getting some sort of decent sleep tracker so we can at least know, like, what are we even talking about? How many hours does it look like? How much does this deviate? Start getting some data, because often our sleep can be super foggy for many of us. It's like, well, I think I went to bed at whatever time, and they think I woke up and I don't know what time that was and whatever. So it can outsource that responsibility a bit. And there's still areas, there's certain things, like we actually don't have people look too much into the sleep stage classifications of deep sleep or REM or what have you, because they're still not the most rock solid as compared to polysomnograms. But some of the other metrics tend to fare well in comparison. So like, did you go to were you asleep or were you awake? What was the rate of your heart rate? What did that look like throughout the course of the night? Your respiratory rate, so how much were you breathing? So we can get up under, are there other things layered on that could even make this even more challenging for shift workers? Like, is there sleep apnea or obstruction of their breathing? And, so then they're already dealing with that misalignment, but then they've got some other things that could be impeding them. Are they snoring? Are they this? So getting just the information and the data can be really helpful, and seeing, okay, so it looks like I really struggle when we shift over to like this time frame. How can I really prioritize the sleep here? This would be an incredibly important time too for me to make sure that I resist temptations for whatever, alcohol, late night eating, just kind of stressful things that I might think, and maybe this would be time to avoid those, all of those sort of things, so we get more knowledgeable and knowing, because we have more data behind us and we can start to see the patterns. And then it has us often up level and gamify a bit more of our health and well-being when we have that information. So I think leaning into that, and then we can start kind of making more informed decisions versus just like, wow, I feel really run down the road after weeks of kind of all of this accumulating.
Yeah, I mean yes, I digress when I say shift workers cannot. I think what you said there, Molly, is information, right? Once we have that information, then we're able to kind of, okay, now I have the actual information. I'm not guessing. I'm not throwing things out, here or there. Now I can start to try to structure my life so at least I'm getting better sleep, whatever that looks like. And I'm starting to prioritize that. And sometimes it's like, oh, if I just change this one thing that I was doing, I'm going to get better sleep. And I would never know that if I didn't have the actual data, right? The data can tell you things, the information can tell you things that, oh, if you just did this and did this, you probably have much better sleep as a shift worker. And not even knowing that, you'd be like, oh, wow, I can easily do that. And next thing you know, you're getting, the best sleep you can during the shift working time that you're in, because you made two little things, but it's the data that you need. It's the information. I always say, like, you got to get as much information as possible before you start really, seeking, answers, or at least, seeking answers.
Yeah. And I think you do make a real logical point too, that there is some reality to the fact that if we are going to have variable sleep schedules over and over again for years and years out, that there are some true stats that are something to not downplay at the same time, that are, alarming and concerned for our long-term health. So it does have us, hopefully, and not from a place of like, scaring us to this fine line, because then you don't want to get too stressed out about your sleep. So it's like how to balance it, but hopefully how to prioritize it, and then also see that there are things we can do and be empowered. I think can be really important. And then, I have seen people be able to make differences in their scheduling and really push for at least consistent shift work. So that can often alleviate some concerns or some stressors on the body for them. And, a lot of different room for improvement there. But, you're also speaking to the reality of the fact that there are some concerns there. So getting that information is going to be important.
Yeah. So, I mean, That was great. I think we have a lot of information to digest, a lot of great information. And I think connecting with you. Now, sleep is a skill. Is that online? Like people live in different countries. Can
Yeah.
they access the information and then start? Just give us a little overview of how sleep as a skill works. Just because
Yeah.
I honestly think when whoever's listening to this, because I know there's a lot of guys who still have problems sleeping, they're gonna want to lean into this because these guys are taking their health. The guys in the brotherhood, they take their health and wellness extremely seriously now.
That's
They
great.
really they don't want to veer off the beaten track after being in such a great feeling good and just changing their lifestyle. And people who are not in the brotherhood still want to start the process of getting in better health, better sleep. And so being able to lean in on a program like yours and connecting with you, I think is huge. So how does sleep as a skill work in terms of people being able to access you? And
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you're listening and no matter where you're at, if your sleep's like, okay, or you really, really want to take it on, or, no matter where you're at, our aim is to help up level that skill set. So if you go to the Sleep as a Skill website, we have a sleep assessment on there. And so you can kind of put in some information about how your sleep is looking right now, and then get targeted information back for you around your sleep right after that. So should be right after that, a minute or two, and then it should come right back if all things are functioning. And then it comes back. So just with a rundown of different resources that you can start to utilize right away. And then from that place, so our aim is to get you as much, information as possible to start. Then after that, we have a weekly newsletter where our aim is to be, one of the most obsessive sleep newsletters on the planet, giving as much, information each week. So every Monday that comes out. And in alignment with that, we have a weekly podcast. So podcast episodes. So you can certainly start with all of those things. And we have, different feature articles and things going on that are available right away. And if you then are looking to get more support and go in deeper on this topic, we have different options there. So we run different cohorts, so different small groups, and those are very data-based. So we have at least everyone starting with the Oura Ring, spelled O-U-R-A, no affiliation, but that's one of them. But we also love some of those other trackers like the Whoop and BioStrap, and those can be fantastic too. So leaning into those for the group, and we're aiming to kind of gamify and make it hopefully fun to transform your sleep, but also to then really get some of these things that can make a difference. And also with HRV, many people come in wanting to up-level their heart rate variability. So we look at that as well. And then we also have one-on-one packages from 90 days, but these are all run on an online course that we created. So you're going through that with lots of assignments, but similar to what it sounds like you've created, it brings about, there's so many courses out there that, you might buy and then you just, you're never going to use it. You're not going to go through it. Whereas with that accountability perspective of things, then there's that insurance that you will actually go through those different structures and frameworks and assignments, but then also get that feedback and course correction along the way. We have sleep bots and different things to then start to pattern spot along the way. So it ends up being really, really insightful on kind of what's working, what's not working in your life. But so that's one of the cool things that we often call it, like the Trojan horse effect, where in order to transform your sleep, you're ending up to go into all these other areas of life in order to make a difference with it. So you get that movement in those other areas that you might not have connected were at play with your sleep as well.
That's awesome. So what's the, how can people connect with you? What's the website?
Yep. Sleepasaskill.com acts as a real bucket for all the things. So then of course there's social media on there too. So you can follow, so wherever you might be at, if you're kind of like, oh, I'm just sleep optimization curious, or if you're like, no, I need some help, then we aim to have kind of options for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on. Definitely going to have you back, because I think we need another podcast episode with you going through some of the gadgets, because there's a lot of gadgets that you threw around there. And my guys, men love gadgets, right? We love gadgets. We love gadgets. So
absolutely.
We'll definitely jump on that again. Thank you so much for being on the show. Really appreciate it. If there's one last thing you want to say to everybody or anyone who's listening regarding sleep.
Oh, yeah. Well, one, I just want to thank you so much for having me and for creating this platform. And it's clear to me that you're incredibly passionate about this topic and making a difference for so many people in their lives. Even before we started speaking, I was like, oh, I have some people to send your way that are really struggling and looking to, 60s, 70s, different age brackets. And that it could really, it could make a huge difference in their lives to have these sort of conversations. So the fact that you're doing that is incredible. So I really acknowledge you. And just on the topic of sleep, I think just standing in the context that sleep really is a skill can be a great place to start, because for so many of us, it's like, well, I'm this way. I am, a night owl. It's in my genes or whatever. And that I think it can be really a whole new, like whiteboarding, fresh, clean slate of anything could be possible in this area, and really having fun with going deeper, learning and experimenting with it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being on this, on the podcast. We'll definitely connect again for sure. We'll get you back on.
Awesome. Thank you.
Take care.